One of the things that's worthy of mentioning, however briefly, is the sediment load of a river. So we've talked already about the discharge, and that's a way of measuring how much water is moving through, and it's based on the velocity. But we can also look at the amount of sediment that's being moved by the river as well. Now, water is pretty stubborn, and it will carry just as much as it possibly can. And that's usually based completely on how fast it's going. And so during a flooding event, a lot of times you get water moving a lot faster just because of the extra discharge that you have in your river system. And because the water's moving faster, your river picks up a whole lot more sediment. And in this case, this flood makes it look pretty brown because things are picked up, and in this case, it's carrying a lot of fairly small clay and silt size sediment that make it pretty muddy. Here's a really cool example that happened in the Grand Canyon. So there is the village of the Havasupai village, and the Havasupai reservation down at the bottom of the Grand Canyon along the Colorado River. I believe the tribe has somewhere around 300 to 400 people that actually live along the banks of the river. Their major source of income is tourists going down to come see Havasu Falls and some of the other falls that are down there. During normal conditions, you can see the Colorado River runs fairly nice and blue. Havasupai actually means people of the blue-green water, to sort of describe just how blue the water is down there, thanks to all the dissolved calcium carbonate. But there was a particularly nasty series of floods in 2008. In one case, it actually there was a failure of an earthen dam upstream, and they had to air-vac pretty much everybody out of the Havasu areas, and that's what you can see right here is those air evacuations happening. But the river behind it is a whole lot muddier than normal because the water's running a lot higher. Now, if you visit the Grand Canyon off and on, you can see the water does change color, and sometimes that kind of has to do with seasonal variability as well. Here's a picture I took. There's me. Speaking of the Colorado River, this is a stop I made on a trip over the summer that I took with Glendale Community College. So this is right at Lee's Ferry. I am probably 100 yards downstream of where all of the boats that go through the Grand Canyon, right where they put in at Lee's Ferry, which is pretty awesome. And what you can see is the water's two different colors because we were right at the confluence of the Colorado and the Paria River. We can see that further on a little bit downstream of that as you get closer down into the Grand Canyon. You can see where the little Colorado River is carrying a whole lot more sediment than the Colorado River and confluencing there too. Now, what this means, if you remember the house that was in Cave Creek that was fallen off of the bank of the river, one of the reasons why is because of how much erosion there was, because the water was speeding up because of the flood. And when the water speeds up, it starts picking up more sediment because it can. And unfortunately, that leads to a lot of bank erosion in some places, like that poor guy's house there in Cave Creek. But that also means this sediment gets deposited elsewhere, and we're going to look at some pictures later on of that deposition of sediment at the end of a flood.